Okay, well, Torsten is getting up the presentation. That was very quick. Um, as usual, as surely aware, I might have seen in the program, we want to talk a little bit about 2023 GO Wald, which was our summer school, global outreach, global citizenship summer school this summer, which basically ended today, or at the Scottfest last Saturday. And we want to present to you what we did, what the program looked like, what our weeks looked like, and also, most importantly, what the students, both university students from Ireland and Scotland, as well as the school students from the Gymnasium Kalvarienberg in Ahrweiler, came up with during their project week, dealing with Wald, so forest and climate change.
Yeah, so for anyone who hasn't heard about 2023 GO, I assume that's very few of you, but for those who didn't hear, 2023 GO is a short-term mobility project. It's organized by the JGU Scotland Hub Mainz and led by Sigrid Rieberts, and me and Lea Steinebrey are organizing it with Sigrid. And as Sigrid already mentioned, Lea is based at the University of Glasgow, while I was based at the University of Aberdeen. And we had students from the universities of Aberdeen, Glasgow, and Galway join us for up to 4 weeks in Rheinland-Pfalz. And as you can see on the slide, the first 2 weeks were an optional language course, which 10 of the students did, luckily, and really enjoyed. And we had 2 great language teachers as well. We had a beginners and non-beginners and advanced course. The advanced course was seminar hopping, so they would visit seminars of all different subjects at the University of Mainz and then speak to us about it and discuss it and hopefully improve their conversational English in this way. The third week was the academic week, which is always filled with academic talks. Lea will talk about it in a second, which talks we had this year. The third week, the fourth week was the project work in the Pfälzerwald or Jahrtal, which meant that the groups, there were 2 groups, one which went to Hauenstein in the Pfälzerwald and one which went to Ahrweiler in the Jahrtal. And all this came together at the Scottfest this weekend, where they showed off their work, and we'll try to do them justice by showing you a little excerpt of what they did. And during the time here, they had the chance to work on creative projects based on topics of forest, nature writing, climate change, and everything in between. And this is what you will see today. You're still muted.
Thank you. Okay, so the idea behind the GO program is that we want to combine academic interdisciplinary talks with an actual field work, basically, where we go to a place and work there with the surrounding nature and people. So what we usually first do is have this academic week where we are all meeting on campus, all the students for the first time, and us, and then we hear a bunch of different talks from different subject areas. This year, the first talk had off to a good start with The Whisper of Trees, What Growth Rings Reveal About the Health of the Pfälzerwald, by Aideen Kuhl and Marcel Kunz, who are doctorates or PhD students, I believe, in the Department of Climatology, no, the Department of Geology, with a focus on climatology, and they work with the method of dendrochronology. They are way better at pronouncing these things than I am, where you basically read the climate, the surrounding factors that a tree grew up in by its growth rings. So you might have seen like a slice of a tree, a whole, basically like a plate, but what they do instead is just do a little core thing that looks a bit like a pencil, so that you can see the rings without cutting the tree down, because obviously the idea is to protect the trees and not cut them down. So this was a really interesting method to learn about, as well as they told us a lot about the basics, how much of the German area is covered in forest. It's basically a third, which was I was surprised to learn, though most of that forest isn't a natural one, but grown for economical reasons. That also is the reason why spruce trees are very common, even though they are not very resilient, especially not in the changing climate. Then we, on the following day, we went to the Kunsthochschule Mainz, which was a really nice trip. We also had a little tour around the Kunsthochschule with a student who explained to us how people are studying there. But first of all, we had a talk by Dr. Irene Schütze, who presented 3 artworks of mostly performance or film that dealt with water, soil, and forests in a very interesting way, and also kind of asked the question if art can change something about this crisis we're having, which was really interesting and led to an interesting discussion. The most interesting artwork project I found was a woman who worked together with botanists, I believe, to build gardens out of seeds that came to certain countries and cities with ballast. Ballast being just soil, basically cheap soil that was put in boats to balance them out if the load wasn't that heavy. So that was really interesting, and these gardens were really beautiful, and they were only grown out of these seeds they have found in former ballast sites. Also on Tuesday in the evening, in our Reading Scotland session, which we all attended, Kelly Schmidt, who's here today, held a talk about literature and art in the 21st century, Scottish landscape management and preservation, where she also kind of tied on to that question if art, and in this case, art and literature, can change our perspective on nature and makes us behave differently, maybe. She also told us a lot about deer fences and how we interact with nature in an artistic and not in a non-artistic way, which was really interesting, with a short excursion on Mount Shepherd, which should later be the focus of our Scotfest. On Wednesday, we had another online talk by Dr. Tina Karen-Pusse from Galway, who told us about eco-criticism and how we are perceiving the concept of nature, and that what we think of as nature doesn't really exist, and how we tend to build these natural preservative spaces to kind of go there and breathe out and in and go like, oh, beautiful nature. It gives me so much energy and power and space, and then go back to our lives where we basically just put concrete over everything that grows. So that was an interesting perspective, definitely. Moving on to our last day of the academic week before we left to our project work, where we had 2 very scientific talks by Dr. Christoph Helo and Dr. Christopher Pölker. Christoph Helo being a volcanologist, but also geologist, so geoscientist. So he walked us through the time span of the Earth and told us how climate is made, basically. And Christopher Pölker told us about his research he is doing about air and aerosols and how they change the local climate and also the global climate in the Amazon rainforest, and showed us very interesting pictures and graphs about how the like the whole air masses with especially smoke particles fly over whole oceans, and how wildfires from Africa, for example, can change the climate in the Amazon. So that all gave us a very comprehensive view on forests and how they work and also how they are perceived. And the idea was that we took this all in our big backpacks and to carry it to the Pfälzerwald and Ahrweiler.
Yeah, it's taken some time to change slides. I feel like
I still see the last one.
Oh, here we are. Yeah.
There we go.
The harsh temperatures are doing a number on my laptop, so I apologize for that. I'm going to talk a bit about our time in the Pfälzerwald, especially in Hauenstein. As Lea already said, we left on the 30th of June on Friday to travel to Hauenstein by train. Yeah, the trains, while being a bit delayed, worked good for us in that sense. They brought us there, and Hauenstein is pretty good connected by train. Hauenstein is a small town in the very center of the Pfälzerwald, and it was very much close to all the excursions we had planned. So it was really an ideal location for our stay. On Saturday, we got in touch with the forest for the first time while doing Waldbaden, or forest bathing, which is like almost a guided meditation, a guided experience of the forest. So a guide from the Biosphärenreservat Pfälzerwald guided us through the forest and taught us how to experience the forest with all our senses, basically. On Sunday, the students had time to work on their projects. As we said, we will talk about them a little bit more later, but they are very much on the topic of nature writing, forests, and climate change. And then on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we had excursions planned to inform our students and also ourselves with the knowledge of the forest, with the knowledge of the people who guided us through the forest. The Monday was the excursion to the core zone, of which you also see a picture on the right. The core zone is the very central part of the Pfälzerwald, the part which has been left to nature for a very long time and is not used for forestry and barely used for anything other than tourism and science. So it's very for over a decade it's been left to itself. So it's a very natural forest we could see there, a very dense forest, and you really see the difference when once you step out of the core zone. You really notice the difference. On Tuesday, we had an excursion on forest geology, which was near Dahn, where all the sandstone rocks, sculptures, you could almost say, are. So it's a very good location to study the geology of the Pfälzerwald and what made the Pfälzerwald the way it is today, which is very much dependent on the soil of the Pfälzerwald, because it's has very little nutrients in total. So all the plants there are adapted to this, but especially with climate change, this gets harder and harder, of course. On Wednesday, we had an excursion to the vineyards of Ilbesheim, and we learned about how people over history grew wine, grew grapes in this region, and we also learned about the difference between the different areas of this region, because the geology is very different from the Pfälzerwald itself to the wine growing regions. And we also had a wine tasting at the end. On Thursday, there was again time for the students' projects, which they finalized on Thursday evening, and we had a dry run for the Scotfest, which then happened on July 7th, where we traveled back from Hauenstein to the Scotfest and joined the others in Mainz.
Right, we in the Ahrtal, we certainly saw less nature. Ahrweiler being a city, not a very big one, but still. But there is some forest there, and we went there. We also arrived on Friday, where we just settled in, and we stayed in the beautiful Kloster Kalvarienberg, so an old monastery, where nuns used to live, in the music house, which was surprisingly loud. I don't know how people make music there, but it was a very nice place to stay. And every time we saw it from down the hill, all the students went, wow. So that was really impressive. On Saturday, we needed to go to Bonn, though. Bonn isn't that far away from Ahrweiler, so just 45 minutes by train, where we went to the Haus der Geschichte, which is a wonderful museum, where we took a German tour, which the students took like champs, and were very interested as well. We also experienced some Pfälzer food in the evening, which most of them liked. On Sunday, we had a city tour through Ahrweiler, focusing on the results of the flood. For those of you who aren't aware, but I think you probably all are, the complete Ahr Valley was flooded heavily 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago. When the very small, very cute River Ahr that barely touches your knees when you wade through it, just swell on and tore away houses and caravans. It wasn't pretty, and you can still see a lot of the flood damage in Ahrweiler, as you will probably see in some of the project work as well. So we explored the area a little bit, and then took refuge in the forest, basically, which was high on top of, like, outside of the valley, on the hillsides on the side, where you could see the valley from the top through the trees, and also just experience some, as you call, nature. On Monday, we had to be at school at 8 a.m., which the students didn't love, but we were greeted, as you can see on this picture, very, very warmly, with food and drinks and flags. So that was great. They got to know their students, who they were going on to work with. The idea in the Ahrtal being one university student leads a small group of 3-4 school students to do a group project. Then Tuesday to Thursday, they basically their main thing was to work on the project, and they were all very productive. And on Thursday evening, we had like a little trip to Bonn again to go to the Museum König, which is a natural history museum, where we learned a lot, where we had a tour, where we learned a lot about the Amazon, which also, interestingly, doesn't have a very nutrient-rich soil. It has a very shallow soil layer that is very nutritional, and then under this, it's just rocks, basically. On Friday, we presented our results to the school, and then we had to leave very early to make it back to the Scotfest. So next slide, I think, is the list of projects, so we can have a little overview whenever it decides to load. We should pour some water over your laptop. Maybe not. So this is basically the order we want to present them in. We have a short documentary about the Pfälzerwald group, the week the group had. Then we have a social media project by students from who visited the Pfälzerwald, another social media project with the students from Ahrweiler, a poster about the wildlife in the Pfälzerwald, a short presentation by school students what dangers we have to wildlife in Ireland and Germany, a little fairy tale called Greta and the Witch. So you can think of you can have some thoughts now and I'll explain later. Some recordings of sounds of the forest from the Pfälzerwald, a short presentation about the ecosystem forest, and some photos from all the trash and litter they found in the forest in the Ahrtal. A short film about climate change with a call to action. Nature writing by Iona and Erin from the Pfälzerwald, and finally a short film about deforestation. You're still on mute.
Yeah, suddenly it works a bit better. All right, then we'll get right into the first project, which was the documentary about our project. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and then share again when the movie is up.
Any questions so far? No, it just means we did a great job explaining everything. Okay, Austin's ready.
All right, I'm just trying to get it into full screen. All right, I hope you can see that.
Ein Teil von Wanderers Nachtlied von Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Über allen Gipfeln ist Ruhe, in allen Wipfeln spürst du kaum einen Hauch. Die Vogelein schweigen im Walde, warte nur, balde hörst du auch.
Eng mit Bussen in zwei Richtungen.
Oh, you need to know we're winning.
Es gab eine Volksentscheidung in Irland, wo eine große Mehrheit von den Leuten für EU-Mitgliedschaft gestimmt haben. Und das meinte, dass am 1. Januar 1973 Irland offiziell EU-Mitgliedsland wurde.
Then you can pull it out.
Parts of North America to join together to build continental scale networks.
First of all, a question to all of you. Did you ever see an eco-art project? Are you familiar with eco-art? He really worked like an archaeologist and took
there are some pictures which I took from it in the presentation because they were photos which were relevant.
Pretty simple. Obviously. I mean, this is not.
What could be fun for you?
The rest of the age of the Earth we have very little knowledge about. I mean, more than 3.5 billion or almost 4 billion.
Guided to a tree that would be called top, and the other part would be Franzi. And Franzi will show you some material that
I believe that I now understand in some small measure why the Buddhist goes on pilgrimage to a mountain. The journey is itself part of the technique by which the God is sought. It is a journey into being, for as I penetrate more deeply into the mountain's life, I penetrate also into my own. For an hour I am beyond desire. It is not ecstasy that I leap out of the self that makes man like a god. I am not out of myself, but in myself. I am. To no being, this is the final grace accorded from the mountain.
Beautiful.
Right.
It's Goethe and Landschatten, and is it or is it not the Mario music?
I think it's Wii music, Wii shop
Wii
music.
Okay.
I'm opening the presentation again. Just give me 1 second. Here it is. I hope you can see that.
Yep.
Apologize. Yeah. The next project, or first of all, let me say thank you to Lyle for shooting this short film about our project. I think it very competently captures what we did in the Pfälzerwald, and I hope those people who weren't with us get something from it and understand where we come from with the following projects. This one is by Eileen and Jue. This is a social media project called Powering the Future. You can still follow it on Instagram at @poweringthefuture_, I think. And they made that challenge to raise awareness on green energy. They made little infographics which were quite well drawn and very effectively showed people useful things to know about green energy. And they also had a small focus on the Pfälzerwald. So they took the numbers of predictions, what the energy would be like in the Pfälzerwald in 2030. And they came up with this graph and they wrote a full text to it about it. I won't read everything, but as you can see, wind energy is in their prediction the most prevalent energy source in the Pfälzerwald in 2030. But there's also a lot of solar because the Pfälzerwald is actually one of the regions in Germany with the most sun during the summers. There's a little bit of hydro and a little bit of biomass energy as well. And yes, they combined all their efforts into this Instagram account, and they managed to gain a few followers, and I'm sure they would be happy if they would gain a few more today.
This is our social media group made up of Roisin and 3 young students, and they had a similar idea that they wanted to reach as many followers as possible. You can also still follow them. I think they're called GO Wald, and they have planned to continue posting on this Instagram account. So if you follow them, you can actually still get some information on your feed. They have formulated this objective. As young people, climate change is particularly important for us. Using the opportunity of GO to face this huge problem as global citizens, whilst including our local communities, is what we want to do. So the goal of their page was for everyone to be able to voice their concerns, to have a safe space, because they were aware that the topic of climate change can trigger a lot of emotions in people, which again shows the sensibility that students from the Ahr Valley have for the topic of climate change. But they also did not want to stay on the emotional level. They were really trying to make a difference by getting connected across borders. They have, I think the upcoming is an interview with people from Ireland and Scotland who work with forests, but also local interviews and infographics. Could change the slide. Thank you. So what they did on the right, you can see examples for their posts. For example, the first one is a survey of 5th, 7th, and 11th graders to what they think about the topic of climate change, and they came to the conclusion that the more people know, the less optimistic they are. which is a bit sad to hear. But they still wanted people to know more and at the same time create a safe space for the negative emotions that come with learning about climate change. They had a fact check, common misconceptions about the forest. I think this one in particular was about the Amazon rainforest. They still have, they are working on an interview with a local ranger, forest woodsman, the Förster, in a piece of wood that is very close to Kalvarienberg, and he promised to keep an eye on one particular area of the forest and send them pictures and updates how it's doing, which I think is a really cool idea. And they want to kind of continue this at the school and maybe find new people to join this AG with them to do more work on the regional things. Yeah, exactly. They also did an interview with Matthias Jaschke, who is a former teacher at the school and is caring for the school gardens, for example. What he can see about rising temperatures and stuff. There's the survey with the 7th graders I was talking about. So I think the work is really visually exciting and nice to look at, easy to understand, accessible. So go and follow them at go.wald.
I'm still muted. Here I am. Yes, this is the wildlife poster by Grant and Maria. Grant and Maria did a lot of research about the wildlife and the biosphere reserve of the Pfälzerwald Nordvogesen in general. And they found a lot of useful information, which they visualized on the poster. Down on the left, they also made a short quiz, which I'm not going too deep into now. But they list the facts of the Pfälzerwald biosphere reserve when it was founded in 1992, how big it is, 3,018 square kilometers. They have information about which trees are most prevalent, which is the pine, but the pine also gets reduced every year because of climate change concerns. They talk about one of the trees which was discovered by a Scottish botanist, the Douglas fir, and they talk a lot about the reintroduction of the lynx, which is happening in the Pfälzerwald since 2016. And they started with the release of 20 lynx, 12 females from Switzerland and 8 males from Slovakia. And the lynx population is still growing, and it's showing that the reintroduction was successful. And I think, I don't have the 100% the correct number in my head, but I think it almost doubled the amount of lynx in this area since the reintroduction in 2016. So I think that's a really cool project. And it also translates well to one of the projects from Ahrtal, because they focused on another animal that is being endangered, the Irish pine marten.
Exactly. So Catherine's group did a lot of research. They really had an extensive presentation. Unfortunately, we don't have time to show everything. But the idea was to take an endangered species from Ireland, where Catherine's from, and from Germany, where the students are from, and compare the threats they face. So the Irish animal was the Irish pine marten, which is one of the rarest mammals. Native to Ireland and found mainly in woodland settings. And in Ireland, there's a population of approximately 2,700 pine martens. And what is endangering them is mainly human activity. They were basically extinct by the 20th century, and so there was a lot of effort put into kind of regrow the population, similar to the lynx. Hunting, loss of habitat, poisoning, and persecution, and destruction of habitat are the main problems to the pine marten. That means that they have this restricted movement, they can't reproduce as well, they are being hunted and trapped, and their habitat is fragmented. So that is the problem, the main problem for the Irish pine marten. The German example they chose was the wolf, a very different animal, but surprisingly, a lot of the same problems the wolf was facing. The wolf population is also growing in Germany again. So next slide, please. Of course, after discovering that mainly humans are the problem, they made a list, how can we protect wildlife? We, as in the humans, should stop slash and burn techniques, should avoid palm oil, because forests in other continents are being cut down for palm oil planting. We should try to eat less meat, because that's also a reason why the forests are getting rid of, and try to limit air pollution, and try to avoid using the cow when possible. Next slide, please. Thank you. And going a little bit more into the local side of things, what can the students do? Report litter in the forest or collect litter from the forest, limit the use of wood, and be respectful when being in the forest. Also, don't smoke in the forest, because that causes wildfires, as we will see in another presentation as well. So that was their main outcomes, and basically the call to action at the end of their presentation, that we should be respectful of our surroundings, and especially the surroundings of the animals. Next up, unfortunately, the students aren't here to read it out, because the story is beautiful. This was a creative writing group led by PJ, and they wanted to write a modern age fairy tale. So what they came up with is Greta and the Witch. This is what I'm reading out is a screenplay, because they were actually trying to shoot a film, but unfortunately something with the files went wrong, and the footage is really janky, and they couldn't make a movie out of it after all. So what we now have is a screenplay supported by some pictures. Let me tell you the beginning of the story, and then maybe read the last bit. The idea is that Greta is living with her dad in the forest, and her dad is a forester, and he is cutting down trees because that is his business. And Greta loves the trees, and she spends a lot of time there, and she keeps asking her dad, do you want to come to the forest with me? Maybe a little bit of foraging, maybe you can find some mushrooms. And the dad's always like, I spend way too much time there anyway, all that work, and don't get on my nerves, basically. So Greta leaves alone to go to the forest, even though her dad said no. And she is trying to get a cutting of the tree, to kind of take it home with her and regrow a tree. And an old woman comes around the corner and says, what are you doing? Why are you hurting the tree? And Greta goes, what? I didn't mean to hurt the tree. I was trying to help the forest. I want to regrow the forest. And the woman says, no, you're doing it all wrong. I appreciate your effort, but let me show you how it's done. So she lures Greta back to her place to show her all of her books and all of her knowledge that she has gathered about the forest. And Greta is excited. She really likes the opportunity to learn something new is amazing to her. And sooner or later she finds out, okay, I think this is the witch my dad was telling me about. So Dad kept telling her about this old hag who lives in the woods, doesn't want to leave, even though like she should leave because it's his dad's forest, her dad's forest, and he wants to cut down the trees, and the witch is trying to protect the trees from him. So obviously the dad's pretty annoyed with her, finding out that Greta is hanging out with the witch. So let me read on from here. Suddenly there was a loud knock at the door. Greta, her father screamed, and Greta froze. Greta, Greta, get away from that witch. The witch quickly pulled her back out of the chair and into the corner farthest from the door, putting her arm around Greta protectively. Her father tried to open the door, but the door would not budge. She had been right. The door was locked. In a moment of anger, she shouted back at her father, "How dare you? How could you destroy this woman's house like that? How could you be such a monster?" "Oh, so that's how it is. Now I'm the monster. This woman is robbing me of my hard work by not leaving this land. And you know what? You're getting in the way of my business." They heard footsteps retreating from the house, but a few moments later they were back. "It's about time I get rid of this old hag." They heard a splashing sound, as if someone had emptied out a whole bucket of water against the wooden walls of the house. And a few seconds later, half of the wall where her father had been standing behind was on fire. "What's this? What has he done? Smoke! Get out! Get out!" the witch screamed at Greta and pushed her out of the window, starting to cough already. Greta felt the smoke enter her lungs, as well as and she tried to open the window. The witch was older than her and did not seem to be strong at all, with all the smoke that was forming around them. As soon as the window was opened, Greta tried to get out, and the witch helped her. But when Greta turned over to help the witch out, she was already sitting on the floor, coughing violently. "Go! I will not leave my home," she told Greta, and Greta left, reluctantly, running away from the house in the opposite direction of where she had come from. She could not believe that her father would go so far as to kill the witch and even his own daughter. She would never forget this and would do everything she could to make her father's wrongs right again. Which I think is a beautiful retelling of Hansel and Gretel, as well as maybe some Greta in there.
Yes, thank you, Leah. I think we do have to pick up a bit of speed. I do want to show at least one of those soundscapes. The creep from Matthew and Mark did. I'm gonna play it. Please tell me if you can hear this. Mark and Matthew went through the forest and recorded several soundscapes to show people at home what the forest really sounds like. And besides the creek, they have also leaves and song of birds. I think you can barely hear that. And they also have rain in the forest. I think this is particularly hard to show via Teams because the sounds get filtered out. But I hope, I think in the audience at the Scotfest, it was really impressive. I think we only have 2 or 3 minutes left. I would like to show Joe's film since he's here.
Definitely. So this was just quickly. This was what I was talking about, where one of the students was a firefighter, and she had been called to a fire that was caused by a burning cigarette.
And here you can see how they collected trash in the forest during a 50-minute walk. I would love to show this, but since the time is running out, this was a short film about the destruction in the Ahrtal during the floods, but also a call to action about climate change. We will put all this up on our website soon, and so if you want to look at anything in particular, please check out our websites after this. This group, Aaron and Iona, did short stories, nature writing. They attempted nature writing, and it's really impressive. They only uploaded excerpts, but we will upload the full text to our website as well. But I can promise you it's really worth a read. And then there's the final project, which is a short film on deforestation where Joe was involved. I don't know if Joe can unmute himself or if he has the technical ability, but if he wants to, he can say a few words.
Brilliant, brilliant. Do you want to say a few words about your film?
Not really. It was fun to make it, and it was fun to present. Yeah.
Okay. Should we just show it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Pfälzerwald Forest is a UNESCO protected biosphere reserve located in the Rhineland-Palatinate of southern Germany. As we can see from the ruins of Falkenberg Castle, it is one of the most densely forested areas in Western Europe, providing immensely valuable habitats to the animals native to southern Germany. Forming one of 15 biosphere reserves in Germany, the Pfälzerwald Forest expands over 3,000 square kilometers. The forest is home to many endangered species: the Eurasian lynx, the wildcat, the wild boar, and the endangered red deer. These mammals and many other animals call this forest home and use it as an area of essential migration. The deep valleys of expansive sandstone structures were formed 250 million years ago in the Triassic period. Now dominated by pine and beech, the mild, dry Mediterranean climate allows for a plethora of plant species to flourish in the deep valleys of the Pfälzerwald. The Palatinate Forest is a hotbed for medieval construction, hosting over 500 castles in the medieval times. Now the ruins are strewn over the biosphere. From this vantage point, we can see just how densely forested the Pfälzerwald biosphere really is. Looking down this valley, we can see the highest point of the Biosphere National Park, the Kelmet, 20 kilometers away, 670 meters high. But despite the protection that the Pfalz has with the core zones limiting deforestation and expansion, many of the forests here in Germany are at risk of deforestation.
So what do trees do? Trees absorb carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas responsible for global warming. In return, they release oxygen. With mass deforestation, there is an increase in carbon dioxide in our atmosphere.
Even in protected areas like the Pfälzerwald, oil companies still find a way to destroy the planet. For example, all these pipelines, and because of these oil pipelines, thousands of trees in the Pfälzerwald have been cut down.
Additionally, deforestation can lead to soil erosion.
I'm going to stop here because we're already over the time, but I implore you to check out the film review once it's up on our website. It's really worth, especially I recommend the bloopers at the end. They are very funny, and I think
Thank you.
Decrease water.
Here we go. Leah, do you want to take that?
Sure. This is just a quick heads up that we're going to have a Go project next year. It's probably going to be in June of 2024, including another German language course, and we'll focus on a new aspect of climate change we haven't dealt with, maybe biodiversity, but we really are open for recommendations at this point. If you want to join us, send us an email and we will be put on the list. Also, we will have another Scotfest next year at the 28th and 29th of June, where we will be as goes again. That's just to end it with, maybe a little view into the future. If you have any questions, we're here to answer them, and also Joe is. Thank you very much.